The military supply facility hummed with controlled routine until Supply Sergeant Murphy's inventory report raised questions about equipment maintenance. "Run another quality check, Supply Chief Martinez," he commanded, doubt clear in his voice about the standards. The unremarkable woman in standard work clothes sat quietly near the repair station when her sleeve rolled up during boot stitching, and one detail that changed everything became visible to the room. The effect was immediate. The cobbler's tools scattered across the workbench. Senior staff froze at their positions and faces drained of color throughout the facility. No one had expected to see the Ranger tab tattoo on her forearm. No one had expected the quiet boot repair specialist to carry the mark of the 75th Ranger Regiment. No one had expected the truth. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story captivated you, please consider subscribing. We share powerful stories of unsung heroes every week. The military supply facility operated with the steady rhythm of logistical precision and muted equipment handling. Banks of supply shelves cast long shadows across focused workers, illuminating repair stations dotted with worn equipment and maintenance tools. The air carried the scent of leather conditioner and boot polish, mixed with the efficiency that came with supporting frontline operations. It was 1,400 hours on what had begun as a standard afternoon shift at Forward Supply Depot Alpha 7, located within the logistics compound at Fort Bragg. Equipment repair specialist 3rd Class Maria Santos sat at her assigned cobbler station, deliberately unremarkable in her standard olive green work uniform and basic maintenance credentials. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, no visible identification except for a routine supply badge. Early 30s, with skilled hands that spoke of careful craftsmanship rather than military bearing. Her brown eyes moved constantly between damaged boots and repair materials, while her presence demanded nothing from the methodical work around her. To a casual observer, she might have been any contractor, a civilian specialist from local repair services perhaps, or another face in the endless rotation of maintenance personnel. She occasionally made notes on a standard work order, her handwriting neat and functional. Unlike the supply personnel and senior staff who filled the facility with their logistics credentials and operational experience, she wore no visible markers of military service or specialized training. Just a repair specialist, it seemed, with basic clearance and an assignment to handle routine equipment maintenance. The current workload involved processing combat-worn equipment from recent deployments for refurbishment and reissue. The process had proceeded through standard phases: initial assessment, damage evaluation, and now detailed repair work before quality inspection. Supply Chief Williams, a veteran logistics leader with something to prove, managed the maintenance protocols with practiced efficiency, moving between workstations and checking repair progress throughout the supply floor. The equipment refurbishment had established processing parameters that required careful attention, Williams explained to the facility commander, his voice carrying across the repair bay. The decision to accelerate turnaround schedules created complications for standard quality control procedures. Colonel Harrison sat focused at the administrative console, his face a careful mask. A distinguished supply officer with 22 years of logistics experience, he looked somehow burdened in his battle dress uniform, as if the weight of supporting combat operations had physically tired him over recent months. Maria watched it all, her expression revealing nothing. Only the occasional pause while examining particularly damaged boots suggested any emotional response to the equipment's history. When the facility commander called for a progress update, heads turned in mild surprise as Maria raised her hand slightly from her position at the repair station. Specialist Santos has been conducting detailed equipment restoration, Supply Chief Williams announced. She may have additional assessment of repair quality standards. She moved toward the main administrative area with a deliberate precision that seemed at odds with her repair specialist role. Something about her bearing, spine straight, steps measured, attention focused, caught the notice of a grizzled sergeant major seated near the quality control station. He frowned slightly, studying her with newfound interest. Colonel Harrison, sharp-eyed and methodical, watched her with narrowed attention as she prepared her repair assessment. The colonel was known for his no-nonsense approach to supply management and maintenance protocols. Today, he wore his authority like a burden, his uniform crisp despite the afternoon work schedule. "Please state your repair findings for the record," instructed Colonel Harrison. Equipment Repair Specialist 3rd Class Maria Santos, Combat Equipment Restoration Specialist, she replied. Her voice was soft but clear, her professional bearing perfect. Supply Chief Williams began his questioning, and Maria's responses were factual and precise, but delivered in such a measured, quiet tone that Colonel Harrison soon grew visibly impatient. Several times, the administrative recorder had to ask her to repeat her statements. Specialist Santos, Colonel Harrison finally interrupted. The entire supply team needs to hear your repair assessment clearly. Please speak up. Yes, Colonel, Maria responded, barely raising her volume. Supply Chief Williams continued. Specialist Santos, can you explain your evaluation of our equipment repair quality status? I've been conducting standard restoration procedures and monitoring equipment integrity according to established maintenance protocols, she replied, her voice still frustratingly soft. I've identified several factors that affect repair effectiveness based on current processing parameters. And what were your findings during restoration procedures? I determined that equipment damage responds normally to standard repair techniques. I also noted significant wear patterns that indicate potential operational considerations. Did you document these observations? Yes, I logged all repair assessments and attempted quality analysis through available maintenance specifications. Was this analysis reviewed by supply management? It was not forwarded beyond my immediate repair supervisor. The facility security officer, Captain Robert Torres, approached for additional questioning with a skeptical demeanor. Tall and authoritative with crew-cut hair that lent him an air of command presence, he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to challenging questionable maintenance assessments. Specialist Santos, what specific repair training qualifies you to analyze combat equipment restoration requirements? I completed basic equipment maintenance during my supply specialist certification program. And what level of field experience? His tone suggested the answer would confirm Santos's limitations. I maintain appropriate experience levels for civilian repair specialist work, Maria responded evenly. Captain Torres smiled thinly. Specialist Santos, how could you possibly understand the complexities of combat equipment damage and restoration protocols when you've been working here for only 12 weeks? Something flickered across Colonel Harrison's face. A brief shadow of recognition quickly suppressed. He studied Maria more intently now. Objection to characterization, Supply Chief Williams called out. Specialist Santos's repair assessments should be evaluated on merit. Sustained, Colonel Harrison replied, his eyes never leaving Maria. Captain Torres adjusted his approach. Let me rephrase. What specific experience do you have with combat equipment in operational environments? Maria paused before answering, her eyes briefly meeting those of the grizzled sergeant major near the quality control station. My background includes some practical application of equipment maintenance analysis, she said carefully. Could you be more specific? That information involves previous assignments that may not be relevant to current repair requirements. Captain Torres looked to the facility commander. Colonel, if the specialist lacks relevant experience with combat operations, her repair assessments should be considered accordingly. I'll allow the line of questioning, Colonel Harrison ruled. Specialist Santos, please provide more detail about your relevant experience. Maria's expression remained neutral. My previous maintenance experience involves classified military programs. How convenient, Captain Torres remarked dryly. So we're expected to trust your quality assessments without knowing your actual qualifications to evaluate combat equipment. Restoration? I'm reporting on repair observations I made using established maintenance protocols. As the questioning continued, Maria responded with increasingly precise details about combat equipment, field maintenance, and operational procedures that made several senior supply staff members in the facility exchange glances. She referenced specific damage patterns, repair techniques, and equipment specifications that seemed beyond the knowledge base of a standard repair specialist. When shown combat equipment damage reports, her eyes lingered on them a moment longer than necessary, her composure wavering almost imperceptibly before returning to professional detachment. Do you recognize these damage patterns, Specialist Santos? Captain Torres asked. Yes, they represent the equipment conditions I've been restoring for reissue processing. And your analysis of these patterns proved to be, what exactly? The repair observations you made about equipment condition. How does that affect current maintenance standards? Maria's voice remained steady. The equipment analysis I conducted indicated damage patterns that weren't reflected in current restoration evaluations. My observations about repair standards were documented in my maintenance reports. In the supply facility, the older sergeant major with multiple combat patches watched Maria with growing intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration as if trying to place a half-remembered face from operational briefings. The afternoon hours passed as Supply Chief Williams returned for follow-up questions, asking Maria about specific repair requirements for the current equipment batch. Can you explain the standard protocols for restoring combat equipment of this nature? Williams asked. The supply team would have established primary and secondary restoration procedures with quality oversight, she explained, her voice still frustratingly soft. Standard protocol requires verified repair effectiveness and clearance confirmation at predetermined quality levels. And if those procedures were insufficient or compromised, the backup restoration would proceed using alternative repair methods after primary assessment was evaluated, utilizing specialized maintenance protocols on confirmed combat equipment, she explained with a level of technical precision that raised eyebrows among the supply staff present. Colonel Harrison leaned forward, his patience visibly wearing thin. Specialist Santos, I've asked you repeatedly to speak up. This supply facility cannot properly evaluate repair assessments it cannot hear clearly. I apologize, Colonel, Maria replied, her volume barely increasing. The older sergeant major in the facility now sat forward at his monitoring station, his eyes never leaving Maria's face. Recognition seemed to be dawning slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to something closer to alarm. Captain Torres seized on the colonel's frustration. Perhaps Specialist Santos's reluctance to speak clearly reflects her limited confidence in her own repair assessments. Supply Chief Williams stood immediately. Sir, that's inappropriate speculation. Noted, Williams, Colonel Harrison replied sharply. Captain Torres, confine your remarks to relevant questions for the specialist. Captain Torres nodded in acknowledgement. Specialist Santos, in your assessment as a maintenance professional, was there anything about the equipment condition that indicated modified repair requirements? Maria looked directly at the main quality control display for the first time. The repair assessment suggested restoration modifications beyond current protocol estimates. That wasn't my question. Based on what you observed, should maintenance procedures have been modified? Based on the damage patterns I identified, yes. But my assessment was not included in repair planning. Captain Torres's expression hardened. Are you suggesting that maintenance information was deliberately ignored by supply management? I'm stating that the equipment analysis I provided differed significantly from the repair assessment that was distributed to maintenance personnel. The supply facility stirred with murmurs. Colonel Harrison tapped his pen once against his desk, restoring order. Specialist Santos, Colonel Harrison said, his voice tight with growing impatience. You'll need to explain that assertion clearly and audibly for the supply staff. What specifically was different about your analysis? Maria paused, her eyes scanning the supply facility briefly before returning to the colonel. When she spoke, her voice remained soft, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear. My equipment analysis indicated that the damage patterns included were characteristics using stress tolerances normally associated with Ranger Regiment operations. That information was not included in the repair briefing provided to maintenance personnel. Colonel Harrison's head snapped up, his carefully maintained composure cracking for the first time. The grizzled sergeant major's expression darkened as he studied Maria with new intensity. Specialist Santos, Colonel Harrison said firmly, frustration evident in his tone. This is the final time I will ask you to speak louder. The entire supply staff must be able to hear repair assessments accurately. Maria looked directly at Colonel Harrison. A look of quiet recognition passed between them, though the colonel quickly masked it with professional detachment. The veteran sergeant major in the facility was now gripping his monitoring station, his knuckles white. Colonel Harrison finally interrupted with visible impatience, leaning forward at his administrative console. Specialist Santos, we don't have all afternoon. Speak clearly or we'll proceed with quality approval without additional repair input. The supply facility fell silent. For the first time since beginning her assessment, Maria looked directly at Colonel Harrison. A look of quiet recognition passed between them, though the colonel quickly masked it. The grizzled sergeant major near the quality control display leaned forward, his hands gripping his monitoring station. Suddenly, as Maria reached across the workbench to demonstrate a repair technique on a particularly damaged boot, her sleeve rolled up past her elbow. There, clearly visible on her left forearm, was a detailed tattoo of the Ranger tab with 75th Ranger Regiment in bold lettering beneath crossed rifles. The moment Colonel Harrison's eyes fixed on the distinctive military tattoo, his entire demeanor transformed. The effect was immediate and electric. Colonel Harrison's pen fell from his fingers, clattering loudly on his desk. Several supply staff physically straightened at their workstations, as if witnessing something impossible. Captain Torres's face drained of color. The grizzled sergeant major near the quality control display stood up involuntarily, then slowly came to attention. Complete silence fell over the supply facility as recognition dawned across various faces. Some looked confused, others shocked, and a few, those who understood the significance of what they had just witnessed, appeared stricken. Maria continued in her normal soft voice, but now everyone was straining to hear. That tattoo was earned because I was the squad leader who held the mountain pass at Firebase Restrepo for 96 hours, while coordinating close air support under direct enemy fire. I was also the senior NCO attached to the 2nd Ranger Battalion, which Colonel Harrison personally supported during Operation Enduring Freedom before today's equipment processing began. She methodically produced a worn, waterproof operations case from her work bag and held it up for the supply staff to see. This contains classified operational records from Firebase Restrepo, not the sanitized reports filed with Supply Command. These equipment damage patterns aren't just maintenance issues. They're based on combat stress I witnessed firsthand before my unit was declared lost and my service record was officially sealed. Colonel Harrison attempted to call for order, but found his voice failing him. Specialist Santos, this is highly irregular procedure for repair assessment. My squad and I were declared casualties during the Firebase Restrepo action. Maria continued calmly. I was the only survivor. I've spent 2 years working under civilian status and waiting for equipment from similar operations to come through maintenance, not for personal reasons, but to ensure combat equipment receives the restoration it deserves and to prevent other Rangers from being endangered by substandard repair work. A younger supply technician near the maintenance terminals looked up in confusion. This is impossible. Staff Sergeant Santos was reported killed in action at Firebase Restrepo. I processed posthumous decoration paperwork myself. The grizzled sergeant major turned to address him. Stay at your station, specialist, he said quietly. Look at that Ranger tab. Tattoo. You don't earn ink like that from administrative assignments. Maria opened her operations case to reveal combat reports, equipment assessments, and classified documentation. My squad was abandoned because someone in the supply chain was providing substandard equipment to cover cost overruns and procurement failures, the same system that provided faulty gear leading to my unit's destruction and improper equipment support for dozens of combat units. The supply facility erupted into controlled chaos. Colonel Harrison tapped his pen repeatedly on his desk, finally restoring some semblance of order. His face had lost all color, and his hand trembled visibly. This supply facility will pause current operations for 30 minutes, he declared, his voice unsteady. But before anyone could move, Maria spoke again. With respect, Colonel, this equipment processing contains the same quality failures that left my Rangers with inadequate gear. I've waited 2 years to speak. But current maintenance is proceeding with compromised standards that could endanger soldiers in the field. Colonel Harrison slowly leaned back in his chair, his authority visibly shaken. He nodded once, a gesture of reluctant permission. Firebase Restrepo was classified above top secret, Maria continued. Our mission was to hold strategic high ground that controlled enemy supply routes for an entire valley. We maintained that position against overwhelming assault while requesting emergency resupply of critical equipment. What we discovered during the action was that our gear had been sourced through compromised contractors, our equipment requests were being denied, and our operational reports about equipment failures were being suppressed to hide procurement corruption. She turned her operations case and removed a sealed evidence packet. This contains equipment failure reports, maintenance logs, and quality documentation. We transmitted accurate equipment assessments before the final assault. Those reports were received, but the quality concerns were ignored while defective equipment continued to be issued to combat units. Captain Torres stood, his voice hollow. I received direct notification that Firebase Restrepo had been overrun with total casualties. The equipment loss reports were filed accordingly with Supply Command. We held that position, Maria said simply. We were very much alive and requesting immediate equipment resupply for critical gear failures. I heard Supply acknowledge our equipment reports, then watched as different documentation was processed for official records. Supply Chief Williams approached Maria cautiously. Staff Sergeant Santos, if what you're saying is true, how did you survive? And why assume civilian status for 2 years? Maria's composure never wavered as the facility remained suspended in shocked recognition. I survived because I refused to abandon my position during the final equipment failure that cost my squad their lives. I was severely wounded, unconscious, presumed dead along with my rangers. Local medical personnel found me and kept me alive while I recovered. By the time I was functional again, the official story was established. My unit was dead, the firebase had fallen, and the procurement officers responsible had been transferred to administrative positions. She looked around the supply facility, meeting the eyes of several senior staff members. I needed time to gather evidence that couldn't be easily buried again. I needed to understand who was responsible for the equipment failures and who was simply processing compromised maintenance orders. Most importantly, I needed to make sure no other rangers would die because of the same quality failures that killed my soldiers. The grizzled sergeant major approached the central administrative area. Colonel, request permission to address the supply staff. I am Sergeant Major James Mitchell, Ranger Regiment retired. I was the battalion sergeant major when Staff Sergeant Santos held Firebase Restrepo. He turned to face Maria. Staff Sergeant Santos was the finest Ranger NCO I ever served with. If she says equipment was compromised, I believe her without question. Captain Torres interjected. This is all highly dramatic, but it has no direct bearing on current supply operations. Equipment maintenance proceeds according to established repair protocols, not some conspiracy from years ago. They're connected, Maria replied as her Ranger tattoo remained visible on her forearm. The quality standards being used here include the same procurement vulnerabilities from Firebase Restrepo that allowed defective equipment to reach combat units. Current processing is proceeding with compromised specifications. History repeating itself. Different facility, same failures, same source. She pulled another document from her case. This is an equipment summary showing that my squad reported gear failures directly to Supply Command 8 times during the Firebase Restrepo action. We were told explicitly that questioning equipment quality would compromise operational security. We weren't being difficult. We were trying to ensure Rangers had reliable gear in combat. Colonel Harrison studied the document, his supply leadership demeanor cracking further. These equipment reports weren't included in the maintenance briefing I received for today's processing evaluation. Because they were deliberately removed, Maria said, just like current quality assessments are being modified to hide ongoing procurement failures. And just like the evidence was suppressed from Firebase Restrepo after my unit was reported killed in action, the supply facility had grown absolutely still despite the continuing maintenance operations. Every person present was aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even the repair technicians had stopped their routine work, staring at Maria with undisguised astonishment. Supply Chief Williams approached the administrative console. Colonel, in light of this new intelligence, I recommend immediate review of equipment quality standards and potentially suspending current processing pending integrity assessment. Colonel Harrison nodded absently, his attention still fixed on Maria as the facility remained in operational suspension. Granted, all equipment processing will implement enhanced quality protocols immediately. He paused, then added, Staff Sergeant Santos will remain under protective status until these matters are resolved. As staff began coordinating the operational changes, Maria spoke again. There's something else you should know, Colonel. She removed a final document from her case. This is the original authorization for Firebase Restrepo equipment support with your signature from when you served as battalion supply officer. And this, she produced another paper, is the equipment denial that doomed my Rangers. The authorizing signatures don't match. Colonel Harrison took both documents with trembling hands. Someone forged my signature on the equipment denial, he whispered, shock evident in his voice. Yes, Maria confirmed. You've been carrying responsibility for equipment failures you never authorized. The denial orders came directly from procurement command offices. The retired Sergeant Major Mitchell moved closer. I always questioned why critical equipment requests would be denied, Harrison. It didn't align with anything I knew about your support for combat operations. Colonel Harrison looked up, visible emotion crossing his face. I've spent 2 years believing I was responsible for equipment failures that cost Rangers their lives and compromised combat effectiveness. I authorized the operational support, but I never authorized denying critical gear to combat units. The facility communications crackled, and a team of military investigators appeared at the main entrance, led by a stern-faced senior officer. What is the meaning of this operational suspension? The officer demanded through the intercom. Colonel Harrison, I'm Colonel Patricia Foster from the Inspector General's office. We received an anonymous equipment documentation package yesterday containing evidence of serious breaches of procurement integrity involving defective equipment and supply chain corruption. I understand there may be connected evidence being reported in this facility. Maria smiled faintly as her Ranger tattoo caught the facility lighting. Right on schedule, she murmured. Colonel Foster's voice came through the intercom. You would be Staff Sergeant Santos, formerly of Firebase Restrepo. I would be. We have extensive questions for you, Staff Sergeant, starting with how you survived and why you assumed civilian status. And I have answers, Colonel Foster. 2 years' worth. The officer's voice continued through the facility communications. Colonel Harrison, with your permission, I'd like to take custody of the evidence Staff Sergeant Santos has provided and arrange for her protection pending a full investigation. Colonel Harrison nodded toward the intercom. Granted, but I want to be kept fully informed of any evidence relating to current equipment quality and potential procurement compromise. Of course, Colonel. It appears several ongoing supply operations have been compromised by the same source. The supply facility began to clear of non-essential personnel as security protocols allowed, but Captain Torres remained at his monitoring station, looking shell-shocked. Maria approached him quietly while the facility remained in partial suspension. I don't understand, Torres said, looking up at her. Why would you risk exposure? I'm the one who processed the equipment denials that left your Rangers with inadequate gear. Because you were another victim of the same procurement compromise, Maria replied simply. You processed what you believed were legitimate orders from trusted sources. The responsibility rests with those who provided false information, not those who were deceived by it. How can you be so certain I wasn't involved? Maria allowed herself the smallest of smiles, glancing at her Ranger tattoo. Because I've spent 2 years studying every detail of what happened. I know who compromised the equipment procurement and why. I know who altered quality reports and who benefited from the cost overruns. Most importantly, I know you requested verification twice because you suspected something was wrong with the equipment denials. Captain Torres's eyes widened. How could you possibly know that? Those communications were classified. I had help, Maria admitted. Not everyone in military supply was compromised. There are still good people within the system who wanted the truth to come out, and who wanted to ensure Rangers receive the equipment quality they deserve. As she prepared to leave with Colonel Foster's team, the veteran Sergeant Major Mitchell approached as security protocols began to normalize. Staff Sergeant, he said formally, then dropped his voice. Maria, we held a memorial service for the Firebase Restrepo unit. I spoke about your leadership under impossible odds. I know, she replied quietly. I read the citation online. Thank you for honoring their sacrifice properly. What happens to this equipment processing now? Maria looked at the quality control displays showing current facility operations. Now it proceeds with honest quality assessment and proper integrity standards. Rangers can trust their equipment because someone finally told the truth about procurement failures. The supply facility remained suspended in a moment of profound revelation as administrative systems gradually returned to normal. Colonel Harrison slowly stood from his administrative console and removed his supply credentials, setting them on his desk before stepping down to stand on the same level as Maria. This facility recognizes Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, presumed killed in action, recipient of the Silver Star, he announced formally, his voice carrying a weight of regret and respect. The retired Sergeant Major Mitchell approached Maria and rendered a respectful salute. Others throughout the supply facility followed suit, a ripple of silent recognition spreading through the room. Supply personnel who had moments ago regarded her with skepticism now stood at attention, honoring a ranger whose courage had protected them all. Captain Torres, visibly shaken, stood to address Maria directly. I never knew who provided those equipment orders. I've been processing supply requests for 2 years, believing I was supporting soldiers with quality gear. I know, Maria replied. Your questions about the equipment denials that day, I saw them in the processing logs. You tried to verify the orders. Multiple times, Torres confirmed, his voice breaking slightly. They told me I was risking operational security by questioning administrative procedures, that the equipment assessments had been verified through other channels. Colonel Harrison's professional demeanor cracked as he turned to face the supply staff. I authorized Firebase Restrepo equipment support based on procurement protocols that indicated proper quality standards. I did not authorize the equipment denials that compromised those rangers. The signatures were forged. You've been living with responsibility that was never yours to bear, Maria confirmed. Procurement Command used your supply authority to cover their own equipment quality failures. Colonel Foster's team finally gained entry as security protocols normalized. Colonel Harrison, I'd like to request a formal suspension of current equipment processing while we secure this evidence and establish proper protocols for what happens next. This has implications for multiple ongoing supply operations and potentially hundreds of equipment orders. Colonel Harrison nodded. Current operations will continue with enhanced quality protocols, but all equipment processing will be immediately reviewed for potential compromise. He paused. Captain Torres, in light of the evidence presented, you are relieved of any responsibility for the Firebase Restrepo incident pending complete review of the circumstances. As military investigators began securing the supply facility and escorting people to debriefing areas, Maria opened her operations case and carefully displayed photographs showing procurement officers meeting with contractors who profited from equipment quality compromises and supply chain manipulation. This was never about recognition, she said softly, addressing the facility at large. It was about ensuring rangers receive quality equipment and preventing other soldiers from dying because of procurement failures, and about making sure military supply serves those who fight rather than those who profit from substandard gear. As she moved toward the supply exit, her shadow stretched long behind her across the facility floor, the shadow of a staff sergeant standing at attention rather than an equipment repair specialist checking boots. For a moment, she paused to look back at the quality control displays showing current processing operations. The supply staff was coordinating with proper quality information for the first time in years. Colonel Harrison was directing operations with restored confidence in equipment standards. Captain Torres was working to identify other potentially compromised supply orders. Sergeant Major Mitchell watched her from near the administrative console, his face reflecting a complex mix of pride and determination. Maria gave him a small nod before continuing toward the exit with Colonel Foster's team. Her mission wasn't quite complete. There would be extensive debriefings, military investigations, and probably congressional oversight. The full scope of the procurement corruption would need to be exposed, and those responsible held accountable at every level. But the most important part was accomplished. The truth was out, and Rangers could once again trust that their equipment would meet combat standards rather than serve contractor profits. As she reached the supply facility exit, a military police escort approached. Staff Sergeant Santos, Colonel Foster has arranged secure transportation for your continued protection. If you'll come this way. She followed the escort toward the exit, conscious of the eyes following her progress. Supply staff, maintenance personnel, security officers. For 2 years, she had lived invisibly, unremarkable and unnoticed, gathering evidence while pretending to be a routine repair specialist. Now she walked openly, her service recognized, her purpose fulfilled. The older veteran caught up with her just before she reached the exit corridor. Staff Sergeant, he said quietly. What you did, surviving, maintaining your cover, gathering evidence, coming forward at the right moment. It was extraordinary courage. I had a duty to my rangers and to the soldiers who came after them, she replied simply. It was more than duty, he insisted. It was leadership of the highest order and service that honored every ranger who ever wore the tab. Maria allowed herself a small smile. You taught us well, Sergeant Major Mitchell. I taught you tactics and procedures, he corrected. "What you demonstrated today, that came from the Ranger heart." He watched her leave with the investigative team, then turned to Colonel Harrison, who had joined them. "Some heroes never get the recognition they deserve in their lifetime," he said quietly. "They just carry the weight of protecting their brothers." Colonel Harrison nodded, watching Maria's figure disappear down the corridor. "And some truths are worth waiting years to tell." The afternoon light continued to strengthen as Maria's escort vehicle pulled away from Forward Supply Depot Alpha 7. Behind her, the facility buzzed with renewed purpose as supply operations moved forward with proper quality protocols and accurate equipment standards. The supply staff worked with restored confidence, knowing their processing would support soldiers with reliable gear. Ahead lay the challenge of ensuring complete justice was served and that the full scope of the procurement corruption network was exposed and dismantled. But for now, in this moment between what was hidden and what would be revealed, the simple act of truth had transformed a routine equipment assessment into something profound. The power of one Ranger's quiet determination to honor fallen comrades and protect military operations, even when it meant sacrificing years of her recognition to gather the evidence necessary to expose betrayal that powerful forces had tried to maintain forever. As her vehicle reached the main gate, Maria's radio crackled with an update from the supply facility. "All quality protocols have been restored to maximum standards. Investigation proceeding with full Inspector General oversight." Maria closed her eyes and smiled for the first time in 2 years, knowing that this time, Rangers would be equipped with quality gear rather than compromised by procurement corruption.